Okay. Are we ready to begin? Let me see. Okay, wonderful. Well, welcome everybody and good afternoon. My name is Joel Hazard and I am the head of academic collaboration and culture here at Fellowship Christian and located in Roswell, Georgia. And so I'm honored to monitor and moderate today's timely conversation as it relates to security. As we know, security is no longer about locked doors or drills, it's about leadership, it's about clarity, and it's about trust. We also know that as leaders within our schools, readiness is a culture, not just a checklist. I'm honored to have two of our panelists today. We'll have Dr. Chad Gee, Superintendent of Kennedale ISD in Texas. And we'll also have Dr. Greg Schwab, Assistant Superintendent at Edmonds School in Washington State. So I want to go ahead and begin our time by hearing a bit about their school districts and their approach to readiness. So Dr. Schwab, we'll go ahead and start with you. If you'd like to tell us a little more about yourself and how do you get your districts ready when it comes to safety?
Thank you, and hello, everybody. My name is Greg Schwab. I'm one of the assistant superintendents near the Edmonds School District. We're a 20,000 student school district about 15 minutes north of Seattle, Washington, and I've been in my role as assistant superintendent for 8 years. I oversee facilities and operations for our district as well as school supervision, and I have and within that facilities and operations role is our safety focus. And so working with a team of two other individuals, we spend a great deal of time out at our schools doing safety assessments. And specific to the topic today, really about how do you build that culture of readiness with your staff. It's really, in terms of how we get people ready for that, hopefully that emergency that we never have to deal with in real time or real life. It's really just about the preparation that we do every day, ensuring that we're following our safety protocols, that we're doing drill planning with fidelity, and that we're also building I call it stress inoculation, the idea that you want to put people in situations that maybe they didn't anticipate or expect, even when you're practicing drills. And I'm happy to say a little bit more about that later on, but just those are just some of the things that we do, when you think about all the steps that we take to make sure that our staff are ready, for that eventual emergency that we hope we never have to deal with. Again, you just want to make sure that you're putting people in as many situations as possible to help them anticipate or deal with situations that they might not have originally thought of. So I'll say more about that later, but I'll stop there.
Excellent. Is Dr. Chad Gee on this call? I'm not sure if I missed anything. If not, one of the things I want to encourage those that are on this call, if you look down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see a Q&A box there. As we get going on this topic, we really want to encourage you to ask your questions. We only have a short manner of time together. So I definitely want to make sure that as we're going through this presentation and you're hearing a lot of the knowledge of the people on our panel, that you're putting your questions in there. The earlier you can put your questions in there, the earlier I can line up the segment of questions that we can ask our panelists. So Dr. Schwab, it seems Dr. Gee is a little delayed, so let's go ahead and jump into this conversation with you at this moment. So let's talk about readiness and what does it really look like in action? So how would you go about how do you define readiness beyond just drills and devices?
Well, I think when we talk about readiness, when we talk about school safety, and I think you mentioned this at the beginning, that we really do focus on the big things. What are our secure entry systems? What are our camera systems like? What are our communication protocols? But really, when you talk about readiness and the foundation of school safety, it's more human than that. It's about confidence. It's about calm. It's about collective awareness that every adult brings into the situation, when that unexpected thing happens. And so again, this, as I mentioned before, this year our district's emphasis has really been on getting our staff to take the drills that we do seriously. I had the, you know, when I had the when I did my doctoral dissertation, my research topic was student perspectives on safety. And I really asked kids, what is it that makes you feel safe, and what is it that makes you feel unsafe in school, and and then what will make you feel safer? And it was interesting that one of the topics that we discussed through my research was that kids said that when staff don't take drills seriously, when they just kind of phone it in, for lack of a better term, that actually makes us feel less safe. And so our students want to know that as the adults in schools, we are taking drills seriously, that we're following our protocols, and we're stressing the importance of making sure that we're building muscle memory so that when something happens in a true emergency, oftentimes, our brains don't rise to the occasion. They don't know what to do in a stressful situation. So we need that muscle memory. We need to have been in those situations before to know how to react and respond. So that really, I think that for me is the key, is like making sure that we are doing everything we can to stress the importance of our drills, to practice real life situations. Um, not always planning a drill during second period, right? When do we do our drills? We do our fire drill during second period because that's the most convenient time when most of our kids are on campus. Emergencies aren't convenient. They don't happen at convenient times. And so you've got to also plan drills at situations at lunch, at recess, or times of the day where it is super inconvenient to do the drill. But those are the situations that you need to practice, because that's when something's going to happen. It's not going to happen when kids are all sitting in class during second period. So making sure that we do those things that help our staff, put our staff and our students in situations that they're not prepared for, so that they know what to do, so that when that real emergency occurs, their muscle memory kicks in, and they don't have to think, they can just act.
No, excellent. Now, Dr. Schwab, as we're talking about preparedness, can you shed some light maybe on a moment to where your team's preparation actually made a difference within I guess a red alert?
Sure. I think anytime we have, we've unfortunately had a few lockdown scenarios that we've had to go through in our district that are based on real situations that have happened, whether intruders coming onto our campus or students with weapons in our classrooms. And again, having the ability to do a lockdown drill effectively and, keep everybody safe and render the situation, handled, because we had the protocols in place, and we had practiced so that people knew what to do in that situation. I can think of two or three different scenarios that we had with weapons on our campuses where we had to go into full-on lockdowns, involve law enforcement, clear classrooms, and do all those things that we need to do. And again, because we had practiced those things, they were successful. And I think I'm not going to say they weren't stress inducing. They did create a lot of angst and anxiety among staff and students both. But the fact that we had practiced these things and done them, practice real life scenarios previously, people didn't have to think. They knew how to act, and they knew what to do.
Excellent. Dr. Schwab, I'm still thinking about your research topic when it comes to students' perspective on safety. And so as I'm thinking about this, and as I'm taking in your thoughts, your research, and in your personal experience when it comes to readiness, I'm thinking about leaders on this call, right? Those that have to facilitate or have to be able to put faculty and staff in a position to be ready. And so my question for you is, what role does leadership play in building that trust and confidence, not just in faculty and staff, but what does that look like from a student's perspective as well?
Oh, I think that's absolutely key. I think that again, it's about how you approach these scenarios. So it's not just the drills. It's not just those things that you do, those fire drills that you do, or those lockdown drills that you do for compliance exercises. There are other things that we have to do too. So doing things like tabletop exercises, engaging staff and students in conversations about what would happen, what would we do if something happened during lunch. So having conversations with kids about these things, having conversations with staff about these things, making sure that we're talking about them as regularly as we can, understanding that obviously you don't want this to be the only thing you talk about, but don't be afraid to have conversations with kids and with your staff about these things, so that they know we're thinking about these things and we have plans in place and we know what to do when an emergency happens. So engaging in not just drills, but having short tabletop conversations at a staff meeting. If you're a principal at a staff meeting, start the first 5 minutes with a tabletop scenario. This thing happened. What are you going to do? And engage and get people talking about things like that. In an advisory setting with kids, if you have kids in advisories in your buildings, it's doing the same thing, asking them, hey, 5 minutes, we're going to talk about this thing. What would happen if we had a fire in this wing of the building and we couldn't get out here? Where would we go? I mean, again, just getting them thinking about those things in non-stressful situations can help build that muscle memory so they know how to react when a real emergency happens.
Excellent. So, Dr. Schwab, as we continue to think about readiness, and as we've talked about, hey, where are students coming from? Where are faculty and staff are coming from? Where is leadership coming from? Can you sort of give us the perspective of parents, right? Where are they coming from, and how do they respond where they know there's readiness, that faculty and staff are prepared, students feel comfortable? Or have you been in situations where the parents are somewhat hesitant as it relates to a school's readiness? How do you navigate those waters?
Well, I think first and foremost, parents want to know that their schools are prepared. I remind our principals and our teachers often that parents send us their most precious thing in their lives, their children, and they entrust us with their care. And they expect us to keep them safe. And so when we're able to talk about the things we do for safety with our parent community, and we talk about it fairly regularly, we have a web page on our district website about comprehensive safety and how we approach it, and what are all the different things that we do to be prepared. Um, I believe that builds trust with our community. It builds trust with our parents. They know that we're taking this seriously and that we've thought about these things. And so when we talk with our parents about the things we do to help, again, build that culture of readiness, I believe that it helps our parents feel better knowing that their child's schools are prepared to handle an emergency.
Excellent. Thank you. Before I move on, Dr. Schwab, I want to go ahead and welcome those that are new and that are joining. I want you to know this is a webinar sponsored by SimuAlert, Building a Culture of Readiness. We have with us Dr. Greg Schwab on the call. And so we want to transition a little. We had talked about the idea of readiness and the importance of that readiness and what confidence and trust it not only provides for students, but faculty and staff and parents alike. So Dr. Schwab, let's go ahead and transition to the types of tools, training, right? And the building of trust that needs to happen as well. And so what do you see as the role of technology in streamlining communication or response?
Oh, that's a great question. I think we compete with technology a lot in terms of our response to emergencies. I think one of the things we find ourselves in is this day and age of social media and how things happen. And a lot of times people find out about things, in real time. At the same time, we're often finding out about these things. So it's really important that you're using technology as a tool to get messaging out as quickly as possible. So as a couple of examples, so that we are very quick to get information out to our communities when something happens at one of our schools, because we know that kids have cell phone devices and they are communicating with their families in real time. And so we want to make sure that we're trying to get messaging out as fast as we can, because social media moves at the speed of light. And so we have to do our best to get messaging out and be as clear and concise with our messaging as possible, so that our families know what's happening and what they need to do and what they should expect as well. So we utilize the power of social media in the same ways. We have several different communication tools that we use that are technology based, that help us get messaging out. In addition to our presence on Instagram and Facebook and different social media platforms, we also use a tool called Parent Square, which is a tool that can get messaging out to families via email and text, that provides them with very quick updates, that lets them know what's going on at their child's school. And, with regard to, is this a lockdown? Is this a medical emergency situation? Is this a fire or, an alarm of some kind or an evacuation of some kind? just so that families know what's happening, and they know that we're handling it and we're keeping them as informed as we possibly can.
Excellent. Um, as we think about tools, training, and trust, what do you see as, I guess, when it comes to the training, right? What do you see as a barrier when it comes to, oh, it's Dr. Chad. Okay, where do you see as a barrier as it relates to faculty and staff when it comes to this training? Do faculty and staff, as they keep going through this training, is there a sense of being overwhelmed? Do you see a hesitancy? Or what would be, I guess the ultimate question is, what would be your advice for any leader, any superintendent coming in with any type of new technology and wanting now to train faculty and staff during this time?
Well, I think there's always the implementation dip. Anytime you're implementing something new, you've got to make sure that you build in enough time to help people get used to using it, and provide them with the time to become comfortable with it. I think that's always been the challenge. Anytime we introduce a new piece of technology that we think is going to help us in some way, shape, or form, you have to understand that people need time to play with it. They need time to get comfortable with it. And so fortunately, with we provided our staff with a lot of those that time to be able to get to know the tools like Parent Square and some of the other things that we use as our technology tools to help keep people informed. We also do a lot of that for staff so that they don't have to do it. We really try to centralize as much of our communication as possible so that schools aren't responsible for sending messaging out. We have a communications team here at the central office that handles the messaging when a school's in a lockdown. I don't want our school administrators to be thinking about getting messaging out to their school community. We'll handle that for them. They need to take care of their school, their staff, and their students. And so, trying to take as much of that off of the plates of your staff as possible is really critical as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Schwab. Hey, good afternoon, Dr. Gee. My name is Joel Hazard. I'm the head of academic collaboration and culture at Fellowship Christian here in Roswell, Georgia. Thank you so much for joining us today. And so what I want to do, Dr. Gee, is automatically jump in with you. If you would, Dr. Chad Gee, for everyone out there, is a superintendent at Kennedale ISD in Texas. Dr. Gee, if you would, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your district, and what does it mean when it comes to readiness within your district?
Hey, sorry, I apologize. For some reason, the Zoom link was not letting me in at all, and I had to get my director of technology to come figure out what was going on. So haven't had those problems, so I'm a little flustered. I've been rushing to try to get in here and couldn't do it, so I apologize for that. And it's Chad G. It's pronounced Gee. Yeah. And so as far as readiness, the state of Texas has put a lot of mandates on us following the situation in Uvalde. So we have a lot of mandates coming from the state that we're required to do as far as readiness. But we are required to have EOPs for our district and our campuses. So we have those throughout our district. They are funneled off of the I Love You Guys platform, which is what we use. And we have standardized response protocols throughout our district. We have safety committees on every campus. So as far as talking about readiness, I think that's kind of some of the things that we have put in place to make sure that we are aligned. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. G. One of the questions I asked Dr. Schwab, and actually he brought up within his research, are students' perspective on safety. Can you provide us some insight on, I guess, the mindset of your students within your ISD as it comes to safety? Do you see high levels of hesitancy, or is there high levels of worriness? And if so, how are your faculty and staff navigating those emotional behaviors of your students?
We do surveys every year. We do them of our parents, we do them of our students, and we do them of our staff. So based off the surveys and what we have seen, I would not say we are seeing high levels of insecurity at all. I believe it's quite the opposite. We're seeing very much people feeling safe in our environments. So I would not say that we're seeing any hesitancy from students to come to school or anything like that.
Excellent. Oh, that's great to hear, especially in the culture in which we're living. Can you provide an insight into maybe some of the general attitudes of your parents within your district? Are they feeling the same way? Do you see a wealth of questions coming to faculty and staff, or even leadership as it relates to safety?
Yeah, I would say following COVID, yes, we were seeing a lot of insecurity from families, parents, particularly, about sending their kids back into the buildings. But I would say over the last several years, 2 years, not hearing that or seeing that at all. In fact, I think with everything that's come down the road from the state of Texas and from the requirements that we were doing and all the safety measures we put in, we also passed a $98 million bond, and in that bond, we uh, addressed many of the safety issues that were the requirements that were coming down from the state. We didn't have all the funding that we needed for it, but through the bond, we were able to address many of the level of security within our parents is quite high, actually. So,
Excellent. So, Dr. G, as you came in, we were talking about tools, training, and trust. And so I want to ask you the same questions I asked Dr. Schwab. And the first question is, what do you see as the role of technology when it comes to streamlining communication or response?
uh, Technology and communications, we use Parent Square to communicate with our staff, and we use it with our families, our parents. We have two-way communication back and forth between our staff and our parents that Parent Square allows for that. We also use Raptor technology for our drills and for our screening at our campuses. So as far as software and the capabilities that are in there, I would say yes, we definitely utilize that. As far as technology, I know there's a lot of AI and camera systems and all those things that are screening for things. We do not utilize those at this time. But we do have camera systems throughout all of our buildings. In fact, that was a big part of our bond package, was putting electronic door entry on all of our campuses, and putting more cameras and better systems in place.
Excellent. So as we're seeing across the board, there is a heavy sense of readiness, preparing faculty and staff, making sure that we're keeping to the thoughts of students, making sure that they feel safe, comfortable, making sure that we're communicating with parents as well. And so I want to take a question from the group, and the question circles around substitute teachers. So as we're going with the set training, and as we're going with the communication piece, what does the training programs look like for your substitute teachers?
I'll defer to Mr. Schwab.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things I'll say is that it really starts with the clarity of your processes and your protocols around safety. I think when I first started in this role, we had buildings had different terminology for different things, and we had things like classroom holds, we had soft lockdowns, hard lockdowns, and code blues, and I mean we were all over the map. And I think one of the things we got really clear about was like, no, well, let's call it what it is. If this is a lockdown, let's call it a lockdown. If this is an evacuation, let's call it an evacuation. So, and then everybody gets trained on that same terminology so that we know when we say this is what's happening, it means the same thing to everybody. So, so we don't use things like, Dr. Smith has left the building, is like, we don't speak in code. We say there's an intruder in the building, we're locking down this, and we provide people with as much clear information as we can so that so we take the guesswork out of it. And so it really is about about being simple in your communication and being clear in your communication. And then everybody gets trained on that. So our subs all get trained on it as well at the beginning of each school year. They get trained on our protocols. But again, because we are 34 schools in a 20,000 student school district, we have a lot of subs. And so we have to make sure that our buildings are being consistent in terms of how they approach drills and emergency situations, so that they're calling it the same thing. So again, everybody knows what to do. And there's no surprise of like, well, what does this mean in this building? I don't have to think about that again. So we just keep it as simple as possible.
And I would build on that we are a much smaller district. We have 5 campuses and we have about 2,700 students. So we're much smaller than their district. But we do, like I said, have the standardized response protocols that we utilize, which go through the I Love You Guys Foundation, I think, which was part of the Sandy Hook campaign that came out. We also have our ELP for the district that cascades down to our campuses. So we all have the same terminology as you were referring to. We all speak the same language. Our drills are all through Raptor, and they are coordinated. And so we have a alert system whenever the drills go off, or if a real situation goes off, where those drills come to all of our central office, they come to our campuses, they even go to our board members. So that language and the commonality of it all is all built into it. As far as subs, we have trainings for subs periodically where we bring in groups of subs, new subs, and they all go through the same training, and they are all refreshed on those protocols that we go through, and those standard response protocols, the terminology that we use, and what that all looks like. Now, as far as them being as versed as the rest of our staff, I don't think that's necessarily the case. They do go through training on our response protocols.
Excellent. A lot of great information. It seems you guys are really preparing your faculty and staff as well as your community. You got communication, policies and procedures in place. We all know, God forbid, these terrible things happen. They create very high emotional situations, right? High emotions, people are scared, people are worried, and your training, it seems to be very basic, not a lot of steps. This is what we do. And so the question is, how do you train staff to act confidently under these pressures, especially something happens, emotions rise quick. There's just a sense of worry, maybe a sense of being scared. How do you guys go about installing confidence during the training within the staff?
I'll go on this one because I something I actually would like to brag on is that we have what we call code red teams on every campus. So these are emergency response teams that in case a student falls out or a faculty member falls out, they immediately, the code red goes out, the alert goes out, and the team, not just the team, but the campus in general, but the team responds to the situation. But where areas that they left, the other staff pick up and take on their kids and pull them into their classrooms or supervise those areas while those team are responding to the crisis until emergency responders can get there. And in that case, they go with an AED. That's one of the first things they pull is the AED, and they are heading to that area where the code red came from. We have had to use it multiple times. We've done drills on it, but at our high school alone this year, we've had 3 code reds that were not drills. They were actual situations. We had one in our junior high school, and the teams responded very quickly, very efficiently. And, they debrief afterwards to sit there and make sure that everybody did what they were supposed to do and to kind of analyze how the situation went, how did they handle it, what could have gone better. So I feel like we're way ahead of the game in that aspect of it with our training. So.
I think I would add that emergencies are emotional. I think when you need to help people understand that when you get into an actual emergency situation, your emotions are going to kick in. And I think so. How do you help build staff readiness is how do you help them stay grounded? When things get really chaotic, and you do that by training it. You do that by putting people in situations they weren't prepared for. So when we do drills now, we have our safety team that goes out to buildings and they'll throw a little variable at a drill. They'll do a blocked exit on an evacuation. or we'll come up with a simulated injury or a missing student in the evacuation. The goal isn't to make people panic. The goal is to help staff experience controlled stress so that they can build kind of that calm through practice. Why we practice is so that we can be calm when we actually have to respond. As much as I hate to use sports analogies, and I was an athlete, but I hate using sports analogies in this job. But why do coaches scrimmage? Because they want to they want to put their kids in game situations. And it's the same thing. This is no different. You want to put your staff in game situations. You want them to have to go through the actual, a scenario that they didn't think about. That's why I said, or I go back earlier to saying, when do you do your drills? Do you do them during second period? Or do you do them at lunch? Or do you do them at recess? Do you do them at times that are inconvenient? I tell people all the time, safety is not convenient. Safety, but so we have to practice these things at times that are inconvenient. And so again, I think that's another way I think that you help build that readiness in staff to be able to deal with the stress of a situation is that you give them little stressful situations so they know how to respond, so that when the actual emergency, which we hope never happens, the muscle memory kicks in, as opposed to having to think. You just react, and you know how to react because you've done it before. It's not the first time you've been in that situation.
And I would say that, changing the script is a big part of it. When you do your drills, don't do them the same all the time. Like we will do reverse evacuation drills where we will be outside in recess or PE and have a lockdown drill where they have to get back inside the building. So I think practice, I don't want to say practice makes perfect, because that's the bad analogy, but the reality is the more comfortable they get with doing the drills, whenever they do have to react in the instance of the code red, it just is a natural instinct, and they just go and they do it. And I think that's what our ultimate goal with the training is. So.
No, I love what you two have said with just the training and putting them in these pressure situations, but also different scenarios. So there's definitely the human in the scenario, right? And so how do you balance, right, technology and human judgment? Can tech ever replace the intuition of a trained staff? Right, because we want some sound judgment in these scenarios. So how do you look at that, someone's intuition with what's been trained in them?
I will say this. We learned a lesson during COVID when we were trying to be asynchronous, synchronous. Where we were trying to do education, and what was missing was the personal touch. And that became very obvious that kids need the personal touch. And in a crisis situation, kids aren't looking for technology; they're looking for a human being, to help guide them. And so our staff are those people that are going to jump in and take over that role, and kids will follow them because they're looking for that connection. And I think the same thing with the staff. Technology is not going to fill that void for our staff. The human aspect of it comes into play. So as much as technology helps and it gives us tools, it's not going to replace the human aspect of it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think that, and again, going back to my research that I did for my dissertation, kids, when I asked them about the things that made them feel safe, we talked about cameras, we talked about the fact we have access controls on our doors, and we have fencing on our campuses. But what made kids feel the most safe was the relationship they had with their teacher. They knew that teacher cared about them, and again, took the drill seriously and did the things we've all talked about before. But it's that relationship piece, and technology will never replace that. That will never be a thing that technology can do, is to replace the one-on-one relationships that our teachers have with our kids. And that is the thing that made them feel the most safe, was knowing that they had a relationship with a teacher that they knew and trusted.
Excellent. And so there's a lot of wisdom, there's not a lot of knowledge on display here. And so as I go back and I'm writing down my notes, I'm thinking to myself, with all of this great information out there and everything you guys are doing within your districts, what do you see as some common misses that leadership, that superintendents tend to miss when it either comes to the readiness of schools or the tools and training and the trust trying to be built? What do you see as common misses across the board?
Dr. Schwab, I'll let you go first on if you want.
That's a tough question. I have to think about that one. Again, I think you have to prioritize safety. I mean, again, it's got to be it's got to be up there. When I talk about the role that safety has in our system, we go back to Maslow's hierarchy, right? I mean, all those things that we want farther up on the triangle are not going to happen if we don't have physical and emotional safety and security first and foremost in the things that we do. Um, so you can't, I mean, I can't learn at high levels if I don't feel safe. And as much as we want to emphasize, student outcomes and academic achievement and all those things, and those absolutely are the things we're held accountable to. But we are not going to get there if we don't have that foundation. And that foundation at that core is, students and staff feeling safe and supported and that they are cared for in their schools.
So you're saying misses on the part of the superintendent. I'm going to disagree with that. I always say there's nothing that time and money won't fix. And time is not always our friend, and money is definitely not our friend. We're all under, scrutiny with our budgets. We have all these mandates that are coming to us. A lot of times those mandates are unfunded. So where does the funding come from in order to facilitate the safety measures that we know are needed? But the reality is we don't have the money. And so to me, I'd say the misses come from our legislators and not funding us properly and not funding us in a way that would benefit us. And as much as they want to say that they put money into safety and security, it took our bond that we had that passed by our stakeholders in order to accomplish a lot of the things that we wanted to do. And instead of just giving us the money for the safety measures, they want to put everything into grants, and we have to apply for grants in order to get the money to be able to do the things that we need to do. So there's all these hoops that you have to jump through in order to accomplish the things that we all know need to be done. But the reality is time and money. So.
Yes, I think that's a fair statement, Dr. G. And so what I want to do is I want to go to some of the questions being posed right now. And for those that are listening in, I want to encourage you to continue to ask your questions. Again, we have a lot of wisdom, we have a lot of knowledge on the panel, and I want to make sure that you're continuing to access that knowledge and wisdom. So I have a question for the panel. And the question states, some tools rely on apps or multi-step processes, while others focus on one-touch simplicity. What's your perspective on balancing functionality with ease of use in school safety systems?
I just speak from experience. I've been in numerous school districts, and from assistant principal to assistant superintendent to superintendent. So different roles, different places, and we use different apps. I could throw out several of them like Code Red, Crisis Go. I mean, there've been companies that are some still in play, some that aren't, but they all had good points, but they all had limitations as well. And so using the apps could prove cumbersome. A lot of times getting staff to put them on their phone, even load them on their phones, because it drained their batteries, or this app would take up too much of their or it was just draining resources from them. They didn't want to use it. And so I think apps are nice and technology is great, but it's only as good as the people that are using it. And so I think the more simplistic it is, the better, but they all have their limitations. So.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I think the more complicated things become, the less likely people are to use them. And as you think about the role that technology plays in our safety program in our district, we're exceeding the bandwidth of our district's network to be able to manage these things. And so we have cameras that go offline all the time because not because they're faulty cameras, but because our network can't support it. And so, technology is good to a point, but I think you can reach a point too where you oversaturate. And I think we're experiencing that bit of that right now with all the different things that we're adding that take up space on our network. And in addition to our teachers and students being able to use their technology tools to learn in the classrooms, we've got to do some more work on how we increase the bandwidth, but all logical. And so I think that's a question we have to ask ourselves too.
Well, I just had this conversation in my director's meeting the other day with as we've added more cameras. Now it's like, well, how do we know when they go offline? How do we know when they're not functioning? We don't have time to go through every camera every day. So what is our system to determine that they're functioning and operating to the capacity that they should be? We spend a lot of money and resources to the fail safes to make sure that we're getting our money's worth out of them. And they're well, that's a good question. And so now they're having to go back, and now we're having to put things into place to sit there and make sure that we can ensure that they're online and that they're working and functioning properly on a daily basis without it being something so cumbersome, because we don't have the personnel to sit there and monitor it 100% of the time. So, yeah.
Excellent. And so, as I'm sitting back and I'm thinking, with the experience and the knowledge both of you have here, what would be some of your words of wisdom to those that are relooking at their safety protocols and going over their policies and procedures? What would you press upon them as they're going through and trying to figure out how to improve their systems or policies or procedures?
Dr. Swab, you on? Yep.
I'll take it. I think a thing I've learned is, well, two things I've learned. One, I'll go back again to my research. Ask kids; they will tell you. Again, I think it's really important to involve, students, when, as, to what age they're capable of being able to provide, important feedback. But again, I think, students will provide you with really good feedback about what you've got in place for safety, and they'll tell you if things are working or not working. I think the second thing is, despite all of the safety measures that we have in place, we have cameras, access controls, fences, all those things, locked doors, secure buildings are, think about how low tech and how inexpensive it is to just lock your doors. And we stress that all the time with our staff. So we go around and periodically do checks of buildings and find that doors are propped open. Why? Why are we propping a door open? We can't keep our campuses safe if we have entry points that are not secured. And so the number one thing that I remind people about all the time, and again, I get that and this goes back to that inconvenience of safety. Yes, you may have to walk a little farther to get to the office, but is that a trade-off for having a safe and secure campus? I would argue that it's not, and that you really do need to lock your doors. That's probably the most important thing you can do, is keep your building secure. All those other things are great, but having a secure building means locking doors and just being very diligent about that.
So I will add on to that, and I would say there are basically three things. One, kind of touching on what Dr. Swab was saying, changing adult behaviors. Don't expect to see something change until you change the adult behaviors in the buildings, and convincing the teachers to use the app, convincing them to lock their doors, convincing them, it's like that's a process, and and an expectation. Also, don't expect to see it if you're not monitoring and looking for it. And so we've learned to do routine checks, and we're required now to do door audits, where we're going around and checking audits as part of our requirements by the state of Texas. But it does make a difference. And we set a policy where all interior doors will be locked as well. So exterior doors are locked, but interior doors are locked also. And so setting that expectation and monitoring for it. And then oh my gosh, I got busy on my other two, and I forgot my third one here. So I said, oh, think outside the box. We get so busy checking boxes and making sure that, compliance and all that stuff, but don't be afraid to think outside the box when you're looking at, your safety and security. We needed more lighting, but trying to run lines underground. So we went with solar powered exterior lighting, and you know, it saved a lot of money and it was easier to put in. So I mean, the box on things that sometimes handcuff us. So.
Excellent. We have a question from the crowd, and the question is, there are so many new tools and systems available, right? I'm sure you've come across a number of them. And so, with those new tools and systems available, what would you recommend that schools look for when choosing, alert, or
I'll
so
say
again, what
that
would
again,
you recommend? Yes,
be as
go on,
simple,
Dr.
keep
Phil.
it as simple as possible. I had the opportunity to go to the National School Safety Conference this last July, and walking around the vendor halls to see all the technology that has emerged, it's mind-boggling to think about all the different things that are out there now to help keep campuses safe. And but then I think about so many of those things are so complicated, and a lot of the systems that they require systems and things that we just don't have time to implement. And so again, I think as much as possible, keeping it as simple. That's why I come back to my point about locking doors, is that we have a lot of security measures in place, but again, it's not none of that's going to replace just the simply making sure that your buildings are secure.
And mine would be feasibility. Is it feasible? There's a lot of high tech things out there, but with high tech comes high price tags as well. And with the budgets that we're on, a lot of times, it looks great, it looks awesome. These gun detection, AI and all this technology that's out there. But when you look at the price tag, it's not feasible. And unless you're in a major large district that maybe has unlimited budget, but I don't know of any school district anymore it's on an unlimited budget. But the reality is that a lot of these measures just aren't practical. They're not feasible. And looking at what's feasible for your district, what's practical, and what's sustainable. That's a bigger one, is what's sustainable, because you may have a little bit of money that comes from the government for a certain program, but how long is that going to last? And then once that's gone, how are you going to sustain what you put in place?
Excellent. And so, just a handful more of questions here for you. We had talked about words of wisdom to press upon those that are reevaluating their systems. I think parents also play a big part, right, in school safety as well, and making sure that they're following along to what the school has put in place, and making sure that they're following properly the policies and procedures, and making sure that they're talking to their children about safety as well. What would be some of your words of wisdom for parents that are on this call as it relates to safety in your school districts or school districts all around the country?
I would say open communication. We tell our kids all the time, if you see something, say something. I mean, that's part of the, I love you guys. You see something, say something. Parents, if you know something or if you're hearing something from your kids, communicate that. Let us know what you know. And a lot of times they want to jump right to social media instead of coming to us. Come to us. Don't jump out on social media. Come to us and let us work through it with you, and be partners in it together.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think we want to partner with parents to make sure that they understand what our safety protocols and procedures are and how they can let us know as well. We use a tip line system called Vector Alert, and it provides people with the opportunity to share information with us, and through the website, through a phone call, or through a text message. And so that we can get information and act on it. So if you can't get a hold of somebody and you need to let somebody know, I get those Vector alerts all 24 hours a day. And so we're on those things when we get them, and so making sure that parents know how to communicate with schools and what are the different ways that they can let schools know if their kids come home and tell them something that's happening at the school. We want to know about it so that we can do something about it.
Great knowledge and great wisdom right there. I have a question from the group, and states false alerts are just as traumatic as real ones. Have you had to deal with any?
I believe you're talking about swatting. I believe that's the term that is used for it. And a lot of times you're finding that these are happening, they're coming from Florida, happening in Texas. So it's somebody that doesn't even live in your community or in your state for that matter, that are calling in false alarms. We have not been victim of that to that kind of level, but I know of other places that have. But you know, what we do have is a kid will hear something or they'll see something and then they'll hear it from some other kid, they heard it from another kid, and then they'll go home and they'll tell their parent, and then the parent will, put it out on social media. Well, we were never involved in any of that. So, that's where I was saying, if you hear something, let us know. And so I wouldn't say it's necessarily a false alarm, but there have been like situations that are not verified, and so when we were unable to verify that it was actually took place, it wasn't necessarily a false alarm, but it wasn't actual what the case was. So I guess that would be the best way I could explain it. We have had several of those situations.
Yeah, very similarly, we had a situation a couple of years ago where a student, it was the beginning of deer hunting season, and the student posted a picture of a bullet in his kitchen table, and just said, "Be prepared." And a few students saw that social media post and they started forwarding it around to people, and then people started writing on the post, "Oh my gosh, this is about this," and it just went viral. And we had no opportunity. Suddenly, we were chasing it. And as it turned out, the kid was just talking about going hunting. And it was just, but again, it helps you understand just how fast things can get out of control if you don't have people communicate directly with you and say, this is what, hey, I saw this, I should, let's be, I want you to know about it, as opposed to becoming a viral social media thing that we ended up spending hours trying to chase down. Law enforcement was involved. It was a lot. And again, it could have been very easily handled by saying, "Hey, I saw this picture. Maybe you might want to look into it." So again, communicating with the people who can actually do something about it is probably the most important thing.
As we've been going through this whole conversation, we've talked about the groups of people that need to be involved in this conversation, right? We've talked about the students. We talked about our faculty and staff. We've talked about leaders managing their areas as well as parents. The one group we haven't talked about yet is first responders. So, can you tell me the relationship school districts need to have with first responders as it relates to the technology, as it relates to the communication piece, as it relates to the training? What part do they play in all of this?
Well, I'll start and say that, we live in a part of the country that unfortunately made decisions to terminate relationships with police officers for school resource officers in our schools. Our district was one of the very first ones in the state that did it. Our board made the decision to do that. But what that's forced us to do, and I think we still continue to have very strong relationships with our first responders because we've just continued that, while they understand that, this wasn't a decision, that it wasn't my decision as a person to oversee safety and security, but so I continue to build those relationships. But having communication protocols in place, we do have Melissa's Law, which now requires us to be able to communicate directly with first responders through all of our safety and security systems. So getting access to cameras, access to panic buttons, all those things that notify them when there's an emergency in our schools. So, we still have incredibly strong relationships with our first responders. And, I'm on first name basis with all of our local chiefs. We have 5 different jurisdictions in our district. So I know all the folks that I need to work with. And, so despite some of the political decisions that were made back in 2020, we still have really strong relationships and have great lines of communication with our first responders.
And we have the exact opposite. We are required by law, by state law, to have armed security in all of our campuses. So we have a contract with our local police department for 2 SROs. We implement that at the high school and the junior high school, and then we have armed security at our other 4 campuses. So we try to maintain a very strong relationship with our first responders. We encourage police officers, if they're just out patrolling, come swing by the campus and walk through the campus, and I think the more visible presence they have, the more deterrent that is. And we have the 2 SROs that have their police vehicles parked out in front of the junior high and the high school. We have armed security vehicles that are parked out in front of the other campuses. So, I mean, we strongly encourage that. We allow training with the police department to come in during the summer, and they do active shooter training in our buildings so that they familiarize themselves with our buildings. And we try to have as big a partnership with them as we can. So.
Excellent. Thank you. As our time draws near, Dr. G and Dr. Swab, I've asked you a multitude of questions, and so thank you for your willingness to answer those questions. Is there a question I've left off that you feel schools need to be thinking about as it relates to safety and readiness?
I would just say proactive, being more proactive. Like having the code red teams, I think that has proven invaluable in our district. When you're talking about training, basically their training is a situation. They've gone and they've done it 3 times now, and that's more valuable than any training we could have given them. But we had to put them in place in the first place. I think empowering your campus leadership to sit there and make the decisions. I think a lot of times central admin thinks that we got to be informed right away. Well, let them handle the situation. Empower them to sit there and make the decisions that need to be made, and make a decision and go with it. And then we'll get the messaging out later. But the reality is that let them handle the business. So I think that's the empowerment part, and thinking outside the box, and just a few of those other things. So.
And I would say is your approach to safety a checklist that you go through, or is it really truly like thinking about what are the different scenarios and realistically and authentically putting staff and students through scenarios that will help them be prepared in the event that something terrible does happen, so that you know how to respond. And I think that's a rhetorical question. I think we know the answer to it. So.
Well, that's about our time. I just want to thank Dr. G and Dr. Swab for spending time with us today. I'd like to thank you for your knowledge and your wisdom that you're pouring out to superintendents, faculty, staff, and parents alike. Thank you for the work you continue to do, and thank you for everyone who has joined us today. If you'd like to continue this conversation, SimuAlert will share follow-up resources and a recording of today's session. So let's keep building schools where readiness is lived, not just planned. Again, like to thank the panelists today. Want to say thank you for everyone that's joined. Take care and stay safe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you. Sorry for getting on. So.
Yeah. No, you are good. Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for what you do.